Hello and welcome back to Evolution Part 3. In this video, we will be learning about various species concepts, pre- and post-zygotic barriers, allopatric and sympatric speciation, differentiate gradual with punctuated equilibria. A valid question you may ask is, why is this important? Why does it matter that we learn about this? And the easy answer is, evolution is the answer to how humans came on this planet. How did we evolve from our ancestors? How does that work? So let's dive right in.
All right, so we have a couple species concepts to go through today, and I want to first start off by kind of clarifying what a species concept is. And essentially, they're just various approaches of defining what a species is. And, various scientists and researchers have different ways of classifying and identifying what a species is. So we have a couple concepts that we'll cover today, starting off with the biological species concept. Now, this concept defines a species as a group of populations whose members have the potential to interbreed and produce fertile offspring. This is super important to this concept, and just to clarify, fertile offspring means that the offspring are capable of producing more offspring. Now, as with anything, there are advantages and disadvantages to this species concept. First and foremost, it is perhaps one of the most widely used species concept, and it's widely accepted as well. However, the disadvantage to this is that it cannot be applied to asexual organisms, and it is very hard to use this concept with fossils, because there is no way to determine if an organism had the potential to interbreed and produce fertile offspring through just a fossil. All right, so that's covering biological species concepts, one down. Next, we're going to morphological species concept, and this one is actually really interesting. This seems like a mouthful of a word, so we'll break it down. So morph means shape, and ology is equal to study. Ology means study, so morphology is the study of shape or size here. So allow your brain to associate morph with shape, and this should become easier. The morphological species concept is a classification based only on physical traits, so size, shape, form. Now, the advantage to this is that it can be applied to asexual organisms. However, if you get the impression that the classification is a little bit vague, you might be right, because the disadvantage to this is that it relies solely on subjective criteria and can often be misleading. And another one down. 2 left to go. We have the ecological species concept, which identifies a species in terms of ecological niches, focusing on unique adaptations. Adaptations are just the organism's ability to better fit the environment. So the advantage is that it works really well in zoos or labs. But again, similar to the biological species concept, you cannot really apply to fossils. And finally, that's the third one down, we have the phylogenetic species concept. And this concept defines a species as a smaller group of individuals that once upon a time share a common ancestor, and they form one branch on the tree. You might have seen a phylogenetic tree throughout your biology course. So the phylogenetic species concept defines a species as one branch on the tree. Now, this has a lot of advantages. It works well with fossils and with asexual organisms, but similar to the morphological species concept, it can be difficult to interpret, understand, and analyze the data that you're seeing. All right, so that's it for species concepts, and we're going to go right along to pre-zygotic and post-zygotic barriers. Now, let's just break this down again using just word attack skills almost. So pre means before, right? So before zygotic means before the zygote. And then post-zygotic means after the zygote. Very simple. So, and the pre and post really help with the objective. So with prezygotic, the primary goal is to prevent mating and fertilization. So prevent anything from happening before birth. And this is done through a couple of ways: habitat isolation, temporal isolation, behavioral isolation, mechanical isolation, and gamete isolation. So habitat isolation simply means that the two species live in different areas, different habitats, so making them difficult for them to mate and fertilize. All right, then we have temporal isolation, which is timing, essentially. So there are some species that will mate only in the morning and only at night. So that's what temporal isolation is. And behavioral isolation, every species will have its own behavioral patterns, and if there's a clash between that, it can prevent mating and fertilization. Mechanical isolation refers to the physical possibility of mating and fertilization. And gamete isolation is when the sperm of a species is unable to fertilize the eggs of another species. And again, there's a lot of examples for all of this, and we can go over that in another video, but it's just important to understand that these are ways that prevent mating and fertilization between species. Now we have post-zygotic barriers, and the objective is to operate after hybrid zygotes are fertilized. And this occurs in a few ways, one of which is reduced viability. And what that means is that the genes of different parent species may interact in ways that impair the hybrid's development or survival in its environment. So reduce chance of survival, essentially. Survival. Okay, then we have reduced hybrid fertility. And what this means is that oftentimes hybrid offspring will be sterile, which means that they are unable to produce offspring, fertile offspring of their own. And this means that genes cannot flow easily through the species. And an example of this is the hybrid offspring of a donkey, a male donkey and a female horse is a mule, which is sterile, and the offspring of the mule will also be sterile. And that's it for barriers. Now we're going to cover speciation. Now, the term speciation, again, you can use your word attack skills, refers to the time when a brand new species is created. Now, allopatric speciation refers to when there is a geographic isolation, when a group of individuals become isolated from, the main group. They eventually will have new traits and new adaptations, and will eventually lead to a completely new species. Then that's what it. So the geographical isolation can be done with like barriers, lakes, oceans, all of that. Now, sympatric speciation is when a new species arises within the same, in a new environment, and this is the same geographic area. So this is new, and this one is same. Just got to remember that to differentiate between allopatric and sympatric speciation. One way to remember is that same and sympatric both start with S. Easy way to remember. Yeah, so sympatric speciation is when a new species arises within the same geographic area, and it can occur when the gene flow is reduced by polyploidy, a habitat differentiation, or sexual selection. And what this word here means is that accidents during cell division that result in an extra set of chromosomes. And it's more common in plants. And finally, we have adaptive radiation, where Evolution may create diverse species and diversify the species from a common ancestor. So today we went over 4 different species concepts: the biological, morphological, ecological, and phylogenetic species concept, and we covered the advantages and disadvantages to both. Next, we went over barriers, including prezygotic and postzygotic, and gave examples of the ways they could be operated and the goals of both. Next, we learned to differentiate between allopatric and sympatric speciation, and we had a little tidbit about polyploidy, and we learned a little bit about adaptive radiation. That's all for today's video. Bye!